Terry, should I buy the FX30 or the new Sony ZV-E1? Okay, it's time to make a video about this to answer this question once and for all. Let's get it. What's up, y'all? Tight Shirt Terry Warfield back for another video. Hey, remember to be thankful for your life today. And I mean really thankful, because you didn't have to have your life today. So let's rejoice in that. On with the meat potatoes. Well, actually, before we get into it, I don't script videos, y'all. So I'm known to mess up and, you know, make mistakes. So y'all love to call me out on it because, you know, y'all are so perfect. You know what I'm saying? Listen, your boy might mess up, okay? But I did take a whole lot of notes because there's a lot to go over in this video. Secondly, I did just come back from San Diego testing the new ZV-E1. I have a whole 25-minute experience video right up there. So let's talk about similarities first, right? Both of these are mirrorless E-mount cameras from Sony. Both of them cost about $2 grand. And I'm looking at my notes so I don't forget nothing, so y'all don't cook me in the comments. If I did, just let me know, okay? But anyways, both of them are 4K 10-bit 422 literal pocket rockets. Both of them have Sony's newest tech. ZV-E1 has the new tech, right? But the FX30 is still new too when it comes to autofocus, stabilization, etc. Both of them can shoot up to 4K 120 frames per second. There are some caveats which we'll talk about. Both of them can take photos. Both of them have no electronic viewfinders. Neither one of them have a mechanical shutter. However, both of them can shoot up to an 8,000th of a second shutter speed, which is crazy at this price point. Both of them support Sony's digital microphones, so you can connect the pro audio solutions to them. Both of them record gyro data, so you can use that data to stabilize and post. Both of them use Sony's new creator app. Both of them support user uploadable LUTs to the camera. They have the same type of codec, so they both support all intra options, long GLP, H.264, H.265, and both of them in the menu now have Sony's new quick tile pages like the FX3. So now that we got that out the way, let's talk about the ZV-E1 first, and more specifically because it's all fresh in my head because I just got done freaking using it. The ZV-E1 it's $2,199 bucks. And to be honest, this is how I feel about it. I feel like to give you all the sauce, because there's so much sauce in it, image quality wise, software wise, they had to skimp out on the body. And the ZV-E1 is really tailored for content creators, where the FX30 I feel like is geared more towards the working professional. So we'll talk more about that in a second. And I have a list that I'm going to read off, okay? The ZV-E1 gives you all the same things that the ZV-1 and the ZV-E10 has when it comes to vlogger features at the core, right? So you get the product showcase mode, you get the background defocus button, you get the soft skin effect, which I use all the time, but you know, no, I'm kidding, I don't use that, from the other ZV cameras. So all of those easy tools are built into it. However, the ZV-E1 kicks it up a notch because now all of those exposure settings that we wanted Sony to give us on literally every freaking camera to allow you to control things like ISO, shutter speed, etc. from the screen, well, the ZV-E1 of course can do it, and no other Sony camera can do it. Also, there's a new tabbed layout on the home screen that has things like record, that has things like Cinevlog built into it. Like all of those things are now a part of the home screen so that you don't have to dig into the menu. And I really, really like it on the ZV-E1. The next thing, remember I said the ZV-E1 trades a lot of like physical attributes for software. Well, it really kicks it up a notch on the software. First of all, it's got the same but better stabilization system out the Sony A7R5, which is wild, and the same autofocus system. So that means that this has the best of the best autofocus out there. The FX30 does have amazing autofocus, so that's not to discount it, but the ZV-E1 has Sony's latest and greatest, which means it can track birds, animals, roaches, tigers, like you name it, the ZV-E1 can freaking track it. Also, because it does have this AI co-processor, it can intelligently predict where your body is going to be at for autofocus. So if you're wearing a helmet, it can, you know, predict where your eyes should be at, and it'll focus there. If you have your back turned, it can predict based off of you walking where you know where your body is going and where it should autofocus next. I mean, it's literally like witchcraft or some type of space science or something like that. And the AI features are fantastic, but it also, before I get into that, it does have dynamic stabilization. So even though it's got the better stabilization out the A7R5, it also adds on dynamic, and dynamic is almost freaking gimbal like, but it does result in a much tighter crop. So let's talk about this AI stuff, right? Some of you will argue, like I did, that some of this stuff is gimmicky. That's why the title of my video, a little clickbait, right? But it is titled, Is the ZV-E1 Gimmicky? And a lot of these features are really tailored to new content creators, I feel like. But what are some of these features, right? So like auto framing, right? So if you are in the frame, it will almost, I don't know if y'all ever used the Apple device, but like center stage, where you can literally move back and forth through the frame and the camera will shift the frame around to follow you throughout the frame, and it works really, really well. You can see examples of it in that video up there. And also, if more people come into the frame, it's smart enough to stop down the aperture to increase the depth of field to get more people in the frame. And once they leave out the frame, it's smart enough to open the aperture back up to isolate you, especially if you're using a faster like f1.2, f1.4 lens. It's really dramatic. You can really see it. The other thing is it has framing stabilizer, which will attempt to keep the person in the middle of the frame, and it has this new feature called Cinevlog, which automatically adds fake black bars to the frame, puts it at Cinetone. So again, these features are really geared towards people who don't know how to do this stuff themselves in post, or they just want a faster workflow. And I'm missing some stuff, but I just don't feel like going into every single little thing. The artificial intelligence stuff is really next level, and for a lot of people, it will be hugely helpful. Whew, I'm getting hot. Now, like I said, it's got the same type of subject detection and tracking as the A7R5, and it has a new built-in time-lapse mode, which is actually way better than S&Q mode because it records the time-lapse in the camera and creates it for you, and you can even do it in like 10-bit S-Log. So you have all of that color data to manipulate it afterwards, and it spits out the time-lapse for you. Already a time lapse. Another thing that the ZV-E1 does better than the FX30 is now the live streaming option goes up to 4K 30 versus 4K 15 on the FX30, although it might overheat on you. We'll talk about that later. The onboard mic for vlogging is actually really dope. If you don't have a microphone yet and you're getting this as your first camera, hey, the microphone in there is smart enough to be able to hone in on certain things. So for example, when you come into the frame, it detects your face and it automatically thinks, hey, I need to direct the audio to that person's face, and it is smart enough to do it on the fly, and it's actually game changing. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with any other microphones, but again, if you're getting this for your first camera, you don't have a microphone yet, it's really good. It is a cheaper body, I will say that. It feels a lot cheaper than the FX30, but it is smaller, and it comes in black and white if you know you're into colorful cameras. And the huge thing about the FX30 versus the ZV-E1 is the ZV-E1 is full frame, and it has the same freaking sensor out of the FX3, the A7S3, and the FX6, which means amazing image quality, which means amazing low light performance with dual base ISOs of 640 and 12,800, but overall like a cleaner image. There's less noise in the frame at comparable exposure values, and you just can't go wrong with the image quality out of the sensor in the ZV-E1. It's 15 stops of dynamic range versus 14. I mean, you don't actually get to use all that dynamic range, but you get what I'm saying. I got two more things. So the 4K 120 out of the ZV-E1 only has a 1.1 times crop versus almost a 3x total crop on the Sony FX30 because it's APS-C, plus there's a 1.6 crop on top of that. So you could do 4K 120, but it's significantly noisier and you have to deal with a much tighter crop. Lastly, let's talk about photos real quick. The FX30 can only do single shot photos. The ZV-E1 can do burst. Now, the FX30 does have higher megapixels, but the ZV-E1 has way better rolling shutter performance in photo and video. And it's really a big deal in video, but it's even bigger deal in photo because there's no mechanical shutter, so you're only relying on electronic shutter. And with sensors with slower readouts, the ZV-E1 is about 8 milliseconds and the FX30 is about 15 milliseconds. If there's a fast moving subject while you're taking a photo, you might get some jelly in there. Like if you shoot sports, your basketball will literally turn into a freaking lemon because of the slower rolling shutter performance on the FX30 versus the ZV-E1. Okay, you said all these amazing things about the freaking ZV-E1. What about the FX30? This is where it's about to get interesting. First of all, the FX30 is cheaper. It's only $17.98 or $21.98 with a audio top handle versus $21.99 for the body only with the ZV-E1. So arguably you could get a better value because you can get a whole audio module and a whole baby cinema camera for cheaper than you can a full frame vlogging camera, which is wild. Anyways, the body on the FX30 is so much better. First of all, it looks better. It's constructed way better. It's got tally lights all over the place. It's got quarter 20 mount points all over the place. The weather sealing is better than the ZV-E1. It's got full size HDMI versus that punk rinky dink micro HDMI port on the ZV-E1. It's got dual card slots where both of them are CF Express Type A slots. It's got a joystick on there. It's got more buttons and dials. And the biggest thing out of everything is it's got a freaking fan. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. If you are going to be using your camera for more professional work, even if it's just you on YouTube or content creation, right? But you're going to be taking it more seriously. You're going to be doing longer takes, longer videos, or longer live streaming sessions. There's no comparison between the ZV-E1 and the FX30 because the FX30 has better thermal management, and it has a built-in fan. I will tell you the ZV-E1 is going to overheat on you if you do longer clips in longer environments or even like warmer environments. It don't even have to be hot outside. Longer clips on the ZV-E1 are going to lead to overheating. It's not going to happen on the FX30. So if that's a consideration for you, you definitely, especially if you're doing pro work, you don't want a camera that's going to overheat on you. And hey, the FX30 wins hands down in that department. Also, lastly, when it comes to body, the rear display on the ZV-E1, I'm sorry, it's pretty bad. It's only about 1 million dots versus almost 3 million dots on the FX30. So the rear display, especially since you don't have an EVF on either of them, which is the little eyepiece, is much better on the FX30. Now, I mentioned full-size HDMI. The ZV-E1 has that little port. The FX30, like I said, has the bigger port, but it can also do 16-bit RAW over HDMI. I mean, it's really only like 12-bit realized, but you get what I'm saying. It can do it. ZV-1 can't do it. The FX30 has more megapixels. It's 26.1 versus 12 on the ZV-E1. So that means if you're in a photography, you have much more room to crop and post, but it comes with a caveat, right? The roll and shutter performance on the ZV-E1 is better, like we talked about before. So although it's more megapixels, it's also subject to more roll and shutter flaws when it comes to taking photos, so just be mindful of that. But more megapixels is arguably better, and it's APS-C, which some of y'all might think that's a disadvantage, but it's nothing wrong with APS-C. I mean, the ZV-E1 does have slightly better dynamic range than the FX30, but the FX30 can still produce some absolute fire footage. And a lot of people prefer crop sensor cameras because the lenses are typically smaller and cheaper, although Sony full frame does have a ton of small lenses also that are relatively affordable, plus all the third-party options, but you get more reach out of the same lens. Terry, what are you talking about? So if I put a 35mm lens on the ZV-E1 and a 35mm lens on the FX30, the FX30 is going to have a perceived angle of view of about 50-ish millimeters, right? So there's the crop factor that you have to deal with. So that is a consideration when you're thinking about which camera you want to choose. Do you want to deal with a crop factor or not? The FX30 does have Cine EI, where the ZV-E1 doesn't at all. And the FX30 has dual base ISOs of 800 and 2500 and S-Log3. And I speculate this because they want to keep most of the dynamic range on the lower end to combat the noise because it's a noisier sensor. But just know for more people that 800 and 2500 is typically more usable than the 640 and 12800 on the Sony ZV-E1. As I said before, the FX30 does have more customizable buttons, switches, dials, etc. It's got that front record button, it's got tally lights all over the place, and the top handle. So you could buy the FX30 with the top handle that's actually designed and it screws into the body. So you can use the top handle on the FX30 as also a regular handle, right? Well, the ZV-E1 does support use of the K3M audio module, but that module is not designed to also be a top handle. So you will need to get a cage or something like that to use if you plan on running that audio module or some type of handle, right? I can go on and I'll probably miss some stuff. Here's, at the end of the day, what it boils down to, and I'm getting sweaty armpits, right? The FX30 is more suited for long-term, longer period professional use, or more professional use, I should say. And the ZV-E1 is really tailored towards the content creator who is not taking things so serious and maybe doesn't need the dual SD card slots and doesn't care about full-size HDMI. They just want superb image quality and low light performance and all of these new creature features that do make life easier as a solo content creator and a content creator in general. If that's you, then you may want to consider the ZV-E1. But if things like overheating are more important to you and having a more rugged camera are important to you and things like Cine EI and maybe having an audio top handle are more important to you and having tally lights, dual SD card slots for professional use, those things are more important to you and you don't mind having an APS-C camera, then the FX30 is a fantastic value and I would lean you towards it, especially if overheating is a major concern for you. I don't think you could go wrong with either freaking camera. It's really picking which poison you rather go with. Both of them have pros and cons and you just need to pick which one. Honestly, checks the most boxes for you. I can recommend both of them just depending on who I'm talking to and what that person's needs are. And I'm saying the same thing to you. You need to assess what your needs are and then figure out from there which camera checks the most boxes for you. So I know I rambled on and I'm sick of talking. Make sure you check out the ZV-E1 48 hours later video. That video is right up there and it'll be all over in the description in the comment section. So I'm curious to know what y'all think. Let me know. Until next time, I'm out of here. Tight shirt, Terry Warfield. Peace of chick grease. See y'all later. Peace.